Welcome back. Looking live at our board, and there you see Pennsylvania, which will not be called tonight. We've already come to that conclusion.
Or today.
Or today. I'm sorry, today.
It might be called later today, but we doubt it.
It could be tonight, later tonight. Let's bring in our legal panel tonight. Jonathan Turley, George Washington University law professor and constitutional attorney, and Andy McCarthy, former federal prosecutor. Both are Fox News contributors. Jonathan, do you have any calls to make, first of all? No. Okay.
Can you please tell us who won in Wisconsin?
Yeah, I predict this will be an utter irredeemable mess. A few days ago, I said that I was asked what my worst case scenario would be, and I said that we would finish this night with the states breaking on both sides under 270 and left only with Pennsylvania. And the reason is because the Pennsylvania laws and their standards are an utter mess. And we will look with great longing back at the age of hanging chads. I mean, these are really controversial decisions that have been made in Pennsylvania. And it's going to be a very difficult state if it's going to be the focus of this type of judicial review.
Jonathan, can you talk just briefly about the fact that this is a federal office, but there is no federal standard for elections, and it is done basically by each jurisdiction?
That's right. The Constitution leaves it to the states, the state legislatures, to establish the rules for voting. And part of the controversy that has been growing with this election has been the intervention of state and federal courts in changing those state election laws. Pennsylvania is indeed the most controversial. It not only allowed for an extension in which they would accept ballots, but they also said that there would not be a requirement that signatures match effectively, that it basically did away with that condition for accepting ballots. But also it said that even if the date, the postmark date on the ballot was unclear, you would give the benefit of the doubt to the voter. All of that really begs for challenges. And this is not like, in 2016, we were up this late. I was up with you this late. But this reminds me more of 2000. I mean, it has that feeling, and it's not a good feeling.
Tell us about it.
Andy McCarthy, when you look at how this is stacking up tonight and the potential litigation that could come into play in Pennsylvania and perhaps even in other states, what's your take?
Well, I agree with Jonathan that it's a mess, but what's really infuriating is that it was an avoidable mess. I started writing out, I'm hardly the only one, in the middle of October, imploring that the Supreme Court needed to decide this before the election, because if they decided before the election, it would simply be to dictate or to set what the rules of the voting tabulation in Pennsylvania would be, whereas if they waited until after the election, it would look like the court was deciding the election, which, as Chris Wallace said before, the court shouldn't want that, doesn't want that, the country shouldn't want that. So I think if they had taken this case beforehand, as they should have, we wouldn't be in this position now. And I think Chief Justice Roberts made a very risky bet, which was that maybe they could dodge this bullet completely. And, the reason that's pushing all the chips to the middle of the table is there was a very good chance that Pennsylvania would end up being decisive. And
Andy, can you just remind everybody, was that a 4-4 decision?
Yes.
Well, there's been two decisions. It came to the court first on the basis of a stay. They were asking for the state Supreme Court's rewrite of the rules to be stayed. And at that point, Chief Justice Roberts voted with the three liberal justices on the court to create a 4-4 deadlock, which meant the court wouldn't do anything and the Pennsylvania ruling would stay. Last week, the Republican state committee asked the court for an expedited ruling on the merits of the case, that is, whether the state Supreme Court was allowed to change the rules the way they did and the way Jonathan just explained. And at that point, the court said, it's too late at this point, 5 days before the election, for us to make a ruling on the merits. But Justice Alito, in an opinion that was joined by Justice Thomas and Justice Gorsuch, said that doesn't mean that we can't preserve the status quo ante. So what he said was, take all the ballots in for the 3 days after the election, as the state court has said, but segregate them so that we can make a ruling, if we have to, about whether those votes will count or not. And that's where we're headed, I think.
Yeah. You're looking live, by the way, at Philadelphia, where they are still counting. We're told by the Secretary of State there that they're on 8-hour shifts. And you can see them in the back kind of doing the ballots. They had a bigger staff earlier, but they're rotating crews in, continuing the count. Jonathan, so that brings us to the fact that Justice now, Amy Coney Barrett, is in this position in this court that is now 9, filling the spot of deceased Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And Democrats during that hearing were saying you have to recuse yourself if an election case comes to the Supreme Court after November 3rd. I assume we're going to hear that more.
We will, and it's utterly ridiculous. And it's also incredibly insulting. There's no reason under the usual interpretation of the standard for recusal for Justice Barrett to withdraw from this case. She doesn't have a personal interest in this case. She doesn't have a financial interest in this case. She didn't work on underlying litigation or cases related to any appeal. None of those conditions exist. I know of no case in history where a justice would recuse herself simply because she was nominated shortly before an election, and some people view her as some type of judicial shill. That I don't expect that's going to happen. I would be very surprised if the liberal justices would even support or suggest that. Now, we have no idea how she will vote on these types of issues. They are difficult. You know, the conservative justices that Andy was referring to noted that there are both state and federal rights of voting, that this just because a state court rules on voting doesn't mean the Supreme Court has no role at all. But it is important to note that when state courts rule on state law, the federal courts, and particularly the United States Supreme Court, tend to defer on issues of this kind. So there's a difference, you know. So Wisconsin had a case go before the Supreme Court that was decided by a federal court, and Roberts joined the conservatives in rejecting that extension and said that that federal judge was using a form of federal intervention into state law. But when a state ruling came up, Roberts had a bit of a sticker shock and said that he felt he would leave it as it stood. So nothing has truly been resolved in many of these contests. We started yesterday in the red zone. That's the difference from from past presidential elections. We usually get to litigation at some point by the end of the day. We were already triggering or seeing these lawsuits triggered in each of these swing states. Now, many of those cases are placeholders. You bring the challenge in case the vote is closed, and you have a foundation to try to challenge the results. But we have a lot of challenges, including one out of D.C., where the United States Postal Service failed to comply with an order of a federal judge to do a nationwide search.
Judge Sullivan.
Yeah, and that judge is Judge Sullivan, who many conservatives feel is anti-Trump administration. So that could be very lively.
Jonathan, you know, I look back to 2000. I covered Tallahassee recount there, 37 days and nights and hanging chads. And I remember at the beginning, Democrats felt that their PR message, their talking point, was that you have to continue the count. You have to count every vote. We're already hearing that from the former vice president tonight, count every vote. And it does sound like a good thing to say. Sure, count every vote. But Republicans, in some cases, are going to be saying, no, stop the vote.
That's right. And when you hear that line, some of us who were involved in covering 2000 crawl into fetal positions because it's a real nightmare. And part of the problem, by the way, of these challenges in places like Nevada, the Republicans are arguing that the way that ballots are being handled is going to make it difficult for them to essentially walk this cat backwards, to try to look at balloting that might be improper. So there are layers of challenges here which are going to create serious problems for the court. And when people say count every ballot in a situation like this, it could prove utter madness. We're talking about millions of ballots that have come into these polling centers in a fairly novel and new way. It's not that mail-in voting is new. It's just mail-in voting to this degree is new in places like Nevada and other states.
And then you get into the inevitable debate in those counts of whether or not they're valid, you know, whether the signature matches, like the instance in Pennsylvania and in other states as well. I mean, you know, Andy, there's going to be a lot of subjectivity in the question of whether or not all these ballots are valid in many cases.
Yeah, and I think to the point that Jonathan just made, you know, a lot of times things get sort of sketched out in front of an appellate court, and it sounds like it'll work just fine. But, you know, the fact that you represent to the Supreme Court, as Pennsylvania has, that they will segregate the votes that come in after November 3rd, that may sound great in a courtroom, but whether as a practical matter they'll be able to carry that out, we're already hearing some rumblings there that at least some places it's hard to canvass and segregate at the same time. I've wondered from the start, what happens if they come back and say, gee, we goofed? You know, sorry, we couldn't segregate them. Then what?
Yeah.
Andy, so we have a bunch of, you know, disaggregated bunch of ballots, and they can't segregate it.
The one positive, I suppose, is we are at 1:50 in the morning East Coast time, and there aren't any riots or looting, even though we're boarded up here in Manhattan and Georgetown and Washington and other places around the country. But as this protracted effort goes on, Andy, the potential for stuff happening goes up.
Yeah, of course it does. And I think, you know, obviously the reason that all the preparations were done was because there was an expectation that it would be if President Trump were elected, that would be the main thing that would precipitate a lot of violence, just because it's thematically consistent with what we've seen the last 5 months or so. And, you know, that hasn't happened yet because I guess we're all still on tenterhooks. Let's hope it doesn't happen, because we haven't shown that we're famously good to this point at controlling all that. I just, you know, thank heavens for peace for one night.
Yes. Jonathan Turley, Andy McCarthy, thank you very much.